working fine and there's no issues, and I'm just like, yeah, I think there are some issues.
Oh,
Are they more
hey
cultural
guys,
relativists?
I
What?
got I got it working. We're live right now.
Oh, why did you do that? I thought we were going to go on
Well, I
intro.
was in the middle of getting it to
You
work,
cheeky
and
little bastard. Are we seriously live?
yeah, we're
Yeah.
live right now. You confirmed it, right, Reed?
Yeah, it's going.
And I have your name
Oh,
on here. And let me get your.
no, that's all right.
You want me to get your
We can give
picture?
you a copy.
Yeah, we can give you a copy, and then you can.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, try and get his picture up, Doug.
Yeah, I'm gonna
It
try.
makes more sense on your channel because you get more viewers than me, so it's fine.
So you saw the interview I had with Mike Brown yesterday?
I saw bits of it. I saw some highlights. But yeah, no, it was interesting.
Interesting, good, interesting, bad, or just interesting?
I guess. Well, I mean, to make a fair comment, I'd probably have to go back and watch more, if not the whole thing. I mean, it seemed to me to get stuck on a lot of the same points about, well, I did think some parts were interesting about you sort of gave some scenarios about having a dice in your hand and probability and that sort of thing, and he seemed to know. I don't know. I did enjoy his take on things. He seemed pretty knowledgeable.
Yeah. Well, he's a PhD candidate in seminary.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I could tell he was a bit of a smart guy. So, how did you come across him anyway?
I did a video on Lee Strobel because he had a movie coming out. It was just a one-day thing here in the United States. And Lee Strobel, are you familiar with him?
Yeah, the Case for Christ. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I did a critique video on him, and Mike Brown started interacting with me in the YouTube comment section, and he was writing a few paragraphs and asking a lot of questions, making a lot of points. And instead of just typing, I preferred talking. And so I asked him, hey, do you want to do a live stream with me? And he thought about it for a little bit and said, sure. And so that's how it happened.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's kind of, so that's part of the reason why I do these critique videos of famous apologists, so their fans can kind of chew me out, and then I can say, okay, let's talk about it face to face, and it usually ends up being a good conversation.
Yeah, it's pretty surprising how you can connect as well on even the YouTube comments, because there's a documentary called Hating Breitbart, which is about the guy Andrew Breitbart. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but he died in like 2012 or something. But he was like a conservative journalist, and I made this little video talking about how I'd watched the documentary and how I enjoyed it. And somebody who knew the director of the documentary, like, commented, and I was able to actually get in touch with the guy Andrew Marcus who made the documentary, and we did a couple of podcasts together. So it was pretty interesting.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty. It's pretty amazing how Oh, there we go.
Nice.
Here's the logo. Here's my little logo that I got made on Fiverr.
It only took me 10 minutes to do, but I finally got it.
No, but it's amazing how accessible people are when you sort of get into the online space. I mean, I've found that people sort of ask me with the guests I've had on my podcast, they're like, how do you connect with these people? I'm just like, email, Facebook, like, you just reach out and people just get back to you.
Yeah, it's surprising how often people who you think will say no end up saying yes.
Yeah. Oh, well, a lot of these people, they want to have interesting conversation. They're up for it. I think for the most part, it's we did it actually on the subject of religion. A friend of mine, his name's Hunter Avalone. He's about 20 years old. He's a young guy, grew up evangelical and everything like that, and he's at a place where he's sort of starting to question things and whatnot. And I was quite keen to chat to him about, because I'd heard him talk about his faith, and he described himself as a Christian, and I was quite keen to chat to him, and that I heard him here and there just talking about his faith and that a little bit. but I didn't really know how much he wanted to talk about it. I didn't really want to push it or anything, and we connected on a couple of live streams and that, and I suggested the idea about talking about it, and he was like, "Oh yeah," like it was actually something he'd wanted to talk about, and so we ended up on his channel. We did this it ended up going for like 2.5 hours, I think, this massive live stream on religion and things like that, and but I tapped out halfway through because this guy, this young guy, I think he has his own like radio station sort of thing, and he's like apologetics and defending the faith, and like for me it was for the first hour at least it was this quite interesting, like nuanced discussion, and then this guy just comes in and starts like defending the Bible and scripture and verse, and I was just like, ugh, kill me.
Yeah, it takes a skill to figure out when to exit the dialogue and the conversation. Like,
I just got. I mean, I think you know enough about me to know where I'm at, but I just couldn't do the whole apologetics defending thing. It just gets boring. But yeah,
like for people listening on my channel who have no idea who you are, Mark is a former fundamentalist. And
and now apparently, according to Lucas's definition, I'm a mystic, which I was quite proud of that description.
That is, but okay.
And you were a former street preacher, right?
Yeah, I did street preaching for close to 5 years, I think it was.
Wow, how many days a week?
For at least a year. It was about 5, like it was full time, so it was about 5 or 6 days a week.
Wow! And how did you make your money? Like, was it all through a ministry program or something?
No, not at all. So I was living at home at the time. My mum was like, "Yeah, like live at home rent free because you're doing this good thing," and so that was part of it. But like I say, for a good chunk of the period of time I was working. There was about a year and a bit that there was some people in the church that I was going to that were supporting me a little bit financially, not excessively, but enough to get me by. But at the time, it was like in my head, it was like that was totally worth it. I didn't mind. I was happy to just scrape on by and do what I needed to do, and I was doing it for Jesus,
Well, if you're a Christian, that's the only reason to do it, right?
Well, yeah, I guess so. I mean, it was genuinely for me. It was a sincere thing. I mean, I came across. It was around the time. I'm trying to think of the time frame. It was when video content first started emerging online, and I'd come across some street preaching footage by Ray Comfort, and who I'm sure everyone's familiar with. And I was just completely intrigued by it. I was like, it came across as logical and, compassionate. And I was like, man, I want to do this, and I think I literally set a date. I was like, in 2 weeks time, I ordered some gospel tracks and decided that, hey, I was going to do it. And
wait a minute. You thought Ray Comfort was logical?
I thought, no. In the sense of nothing to do with scientific language or anything like that. I mean, here's a logical way of explaining the gospel to people. Here's a logical way of telling people about heaven and hell. Is what I mean.
Hey, speaking of Ray Comfort, I had a pastor knock on my door a couple weekends ago, and he was in for a big surprise. He actually wrote me a letter afterwards. And said that, I don't know where that letter went, but he basically said he had no idea what he was walking into. I was very civil and nice to him, but I asked him first question after he introduced himself to me and invited me to his church. I asked him, "So why are you a Christian?" And it was like deer in the headlights. It was like, I honestly, it might have been decades since he had ever been asked that question before. And then I asked him, well, why do you believe the Bible is God's word? Again, deer in the headlights, like pause for 6-7 seconds. And the comments like, well, Doug, I I want people to read their Bible and know God. And I said, you know what? I'm an atheist and I read my Bible almost every day. Online, of course.
Oh, wow.
But is the fact that you used to be a street preacher the main kind of impetus why you, it seems to me you push back on SC quite a bit. Do you think that's the reason?
Yeah, let's maybe not go straight into that. No, that's fine. We can go there. No, I do. I mean, if anybody listened to my conversation the other day with Lucas, it did it. Honestly, Lucas and I actually agreed at the end of the conversation that it was actually, ironically, one of the best conversations him and I had actually ever had. I did entitle the video, "Is Street Epistemology Cancer?" And obviously that was a tongue-in-cheek kind of title. But no, I mean, I did admit to myself, I was like, I'm fascinated with, how do I say this? The confidence that you and others seem to have in this method of street epistemology and in the Socratic method intrigues me. It does, and I'm just, I guess, I feel I'm trying to be diplomatic. It comes across as a faith in a sense to me. It comes across as a belief in the system. And
can I propose something to you? Just a quick thought popped into my head when you said that, and that is maybe you're confusing the confidence in the method with the confidence of the person, because I'm a pretty confident guy in all areas of life that I put myself into. Things that I'm not good at or whatever, I tend to,
Sure.
And so maybe when you look at me, you just see a confident person and you translate to mean that I'm confident in that method.
I would, if it was only, no, because I'm not, it's not isolated to just what I see in you. It's what I see as a pattern emerging amongst basically all of you that seem to go along with this ideology or this method or whatever you want to call it. And it intrigues me. And I do see elements. I mean, of course, given the filter of the way I see the world and where I've come from, of course, of course I'm going to make comparisons. Of course I'm going to make comparisons to what I did and where I came from. When I see this group of atheists who are essentially going out or going online and initiating these conversations with complete strangers and challenging their beliefs, and that does have elements to what I did. I'm not saying it's the same. I'm not saying it's exactly the same at all, but it definitely has elements to it.
Sure, yeah.
Let me tell you why I think that maybe some are confident, because I think it's an easy method. Because yesterday, for example, here we have a PhD candidate who knows way more about the Bible than I do. And I felt confident to interact with him. Why? Because I'm asking him questions. I'm okay with being treated like a 5-year-old. A lot of people in my comments section think, he was very demeaning to you and derogatory to you, Doug. I don't care. I want to really know what he thinks and why he thinks it. And so I don't have to actually know the details of whatever he's talking about. I can just ask him, tell me now.
Yeah.
And that freedom to just be able to listen and learn gives you that confidence.
Yeah, and I guess at the core, we're kind of asking people if their own beliefs make sense to themselves at the most, deep level to them.
Yeah, and I would probably argue that they don't, to be honest. I think, I would say, the human heart is a mystery even unto itself. And I think that there is a disconnect between what we claim to believe and what we actually do. And I think, it's interesting because, the whole framework of this SE sort of endeavor and this process that you go through, it stays in the realm of the hypothetical. It doesn't really challenge anybody pragmatically in a real sense. It challenges their question. It challenges them to question and to don't you call me a theist. Don't you box me in like that. Um,
You're not a theist?
I don't know. It's just this whole thing of labeling, and I just don't like it. I don't. I mean, it automatically connotates certain.
How's that?
I don't know. People think what they want. People can make up their own minds. It's fine. I'm just.
I changed it to Mark as a human.
Yeah, exactly. I like that. Exactly. That's what I like, and that's what I enjoy about talking with Lucas, because Lucas and I, what happened with our friendship is we got past the whole theist atheist thing altogether, and we're like, I'm a human being, you're a human being, let's actually just be friends, and it was like, what a novel idea, you know. So I'm happy to interact with you guys. I love it. Bring it
That's
on,
great.
You know? I'm not always going to be up for the debate and the challenge and stuff, but that's fine, you know.
Yeah, and I guess at the core of SC, like maybe the moral core of it is like we want to have people value, you know, listening to arguments on the other side in some way as well.
Yeah.
And just being able to have a conversation with people without
but
getting.
I just don't think. One thing I do push back, I mean, it's funny, you know, Lucas, you know, referred to me as being a mystic. I wouldn't quite put that label on myself, to be honest. I do. I mean, I have read Christian mystic sort of writing and ideas, I guess, that are out there, and that does exist. But I do think human beings are a bit of a mystery, and I do think that there's part of me that wants to leave it that way. It's like when you go through some kind of, say, like when you experience like art, or like you're you know, you're watching like a movie or whatever, you get lost in something fictional, right? You don't want the curtain to be pulled back completely. You want the element of mystery. You don't want to see it all. And I think I sort of,
that's why I stay partially dressed when I'm making love.
Fair enough. That's beautiful. I love it.
That cowboy hat stays on.
And the socks.
That's the first time. I'm not joking you, Doug. That's the first time you've made a legitimate joke to me. That's made me laugh. Like, I have laughed at you before, but I'm like, that's refreshing to hear you have a sense of humor like that.
Oh, it's always been there.
Because I do feel like, can I be honest, Doug? I like you a lot. I think you're a great guy. But I do, when I listen to you have these conversations, and admittedly, it's the only part of your life that I see. But I sometimes feel like, man, this guy takes himself really seriously. Like,
well,
that's
you know,
kind of
if you ever come to the United States, come down to the Old Cowboy Polk Bar, and you'll see me dancing every Friday to Sunday.
But again, I'm just realizing as I say this out loud, I'm like, this is the only part of your life that I see, and so it is very limited, you know.
Yeah.
What do you guys think of the whole? Because I know I've probably thrown the accusation out, you know, and it's something I actually discussed with Milo Yiannopoulos, and he did a thing on the Dave Rubin show about atheism and that. We sort of discussed the idea of atheism becoming, you know, in and of itself very dogmatic and very militant. And what do you think of those sort of accusations around?
I agree.
Fair enough. Brilliant.
Like I used to be a vice president of a local like atheist group here in Los Angeles.
Oh no, I'm so sorry.
Like that's where I came from, like a couple years ago.
Okay.
And I think like SE has helped me become just like not a fundamentalist atheist, but just like a compassionate human. Someone.
But it's interesting. But that's the thing. Like there is this almost it's interesting how you say that. You sort of attribute it to SE, because it's like I had a friend of mine who I used to work with here in New Zealand. He was actually from the UK, and he talked about, you know, you often hear Christians share their testimony about, you know, becoming, you know, a Christian or whatever, and it's this like light, you know, dark to light kind of story. His experience, him going through the experience of growing up Christian and going through Christian education and everything like that, and then becoming an atheist, like he almost talked about becoming an atheist being like his kind of salvation experience. Like it was like his testimony becoming an atheist. And I tend to believe that, and this is the whole thing, the whole area of belief and what do you believe and all this kind of stuff. It's fascinating because I don't think we fully know what we believe ourselves half the time.
Yeah.
You know, it's like people use the example of like comedy. Like when you watch a stand-up comedian, they make a joke and you're like, oh, I should be offended at this, but I'm laughing. Or, you know, it kind of like it betrays what you thought about yourself. And this image, like we all have this self-image, right? We all have this image of ourselves. We like to think of ourselves like we have a vested interest in believing ourselves to be a good person and kind and compassionate because we have to live with ourselves, right? So it's in our best interest to think highly of ourselves. And
Mark, I agree with you that a lot of times we don't even know why we believe what we believe, and we can't articulate it. But to get back to your point of why are so many atheists militant, and I think especially in the United States, I don't know what it's like in Australia where you're from, but
I'm in New Zealand, Doug.
New Zealand.
I apologize.
You can't mix this up.
It's the same thing.
No, it is not the same. Well,
I'm kidding.
He's from Canada, Doug.
Yeah, well, Canada is the 51st state.
Smarter.
That's a big one.
I'm going to try to speak for all militant atheists right now, and and I have no right to do so, but I'm going to anyhow. A lot of them were former believers, and they feel, and if they feel that they've been lied to for a big chunk of their life. So now imagine, and if there's Christians watching, please give me a little bit of charity here,
No, I'm with you. I get what you're saying.
They truly believe that, look, I've spent so many years believing this stuff, and now looking back on it, why did they lie to me? Why didn't they tell me this? And so it can't help but have a little bit of a bitterness there, and regret and remorse and all the what ifs, and so I think that's why a lot of atheists, like I know a few atheists who their parents were atheists and the grandparents were atheists, and they don't act like the ones who have come out of religion. Not always.
Yeah, that happened to me at 23. Like I was extremely angry. Like I saw like so much of my time as being wasted because I thought I was going to live forever. But Doug, you lost it at like 35. Yeah. Like when did you lose it? You know?
Closer to 40.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. Look, I can appreciate that, and there is, you know, pretty intense emotion attached to it, and it's pretty refreshing to hear you acknowledge that. I think, you know, one of the sort of aha moments I had was there was a book I read a number of years ago called The Irresistible Revolution by a guy named Shane Claiborne, and he was a bit of a monk kind of hippie Christian kind of guy, but there was a line in his book where like he went to India and like worked with Mother Teresa and all this kind of stuff, but there was a line in his book where he said, and it just really, it was one of those real aha moments that just really struck me, and he says, he said, growing up I heard so much about life after death that I had to stop and wonder if there was life before death.
Yeah.
You know?
Exactly, yeah.
And that was like, I had to admit to myself, even, you know, just coming out of sort of fundamentalism, reading that, I was like, yeah, okay, good point. and in many ways, like even though I definitely do not call myself an atheist, I can sympathize with a lot of it, and in a weird way, I kind of want to help. Like, because I know that there are, as both of you would know as well, like I know there are many people who grow up religious, who have it all their lives, like we've been saying, and they don't know, they're not allowed to question. I mean, you know, it was funny, I had the guy Jay Moore on my podcast. He's an actor out in LA, and he has his own podcast, and he's a Catholic, and he talks about his faith on his podcast and things. And I was talking with him about growing up in this sort of Christian bubble that I did, and I said, oh, I just sort of casually said, it's funny, like sometimes somebody will reflect something back to you that you've said, but they do it through their kind of filter, and you don't. It sort of hits you in a different way. Like I sort of just casually said to him, I said, oh, I grew up in this world where I started asking questions that you weren't allowed to ask, and he was like, whoa, like slow down. He goes, I want you to think about that. He goes, you started asking questions you weren't supposed to ask, and he was just like, who are these people? Like he was like outraged on my behalf, and he gave me that sort of sense of justification and vindication where I was like, oh shit, like, because like I had given these people a free pass. Like I had kind of justified them in my mind, going, oh yeah, they all just wanted the best for me and blah blah blah. And you sort of, I'd done this thing where I'd sort of like demonized myself, like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have been asking these questions or whatever, like I was just rocking the boat, or do you know what I mean? But he was like, no, I want you to think about this. He's just like, he was just like, I don't know how you can ask a wrong question. And I was just like, and he said it with this like level of empathy and compassion. I was just like, oh wow. And I know, and I have to assume, right, that if that's my experience, there's got to be other people out there. And Doug, you obviously know yourself, like, you're a Christian kind of guy as well, and like there's got to be people out there. We know there's people out there who are asking these questions internally, but they're not allowed to ask them out loud, and it's eating them up inside.
Like my wife is a born again believer, and we talked about this the other day of how she asked me questions like, Doug, when you were like in your teens, was there someone you could talk to about your questions?
Yeah.
And I said, well, I tried with the youth pastor and Sunday school teachers and so forth, but it was that same, like, if you question in a certain way or too much or whatever, or certain questions, like, you are looked down upon. Like, what's going on here? And
questioning is tantamount to doubt, and doubt, as we all know, is the biggest evil,
But if your beliefs are true, like, you have no reason to be afraid of questioning. Like, all you have is like the upside.
But the thing is, when you're in that world, questioning God or questioning tradition or questioning the Bible, it is, as you would know, it's tantamount to calling God a liar in that world. You know what I mean? Like, that's how they see it.
Yeah,
that's how they see it, and there's no two ways about it. And a lot of my friends who, I still keep in touch with every now and again, and I try harder than they do to keep in contact, but they're still in the same mindset, and it blows me away. It honestly, that's the thing. Like, I can't understand how people can stay, because I've always been by nature a person that asks questions. I've always been a curious person. I've never wanted to accept reality as it is. I've always been that kind of like, why does it have to be this way? Why? Like, and it's bothered people. It's I've stood on people's toes and annoyed people because.
Well, it sounds like you're okay with uncertainty.
Oh, I'm absolutely okay with it. Absolutely. Yeah. I've come to a place of being okay with it. I haven't always been okay with it.
But most people are not like you.
No. I don't know anyone who's like me.
with uncertainty.
Did you say most people aren't like me, or most people don't like me?
No. Aren't like you, because I think most people like security, certainty, the 9-to-5 job, a certain paycheck.
Absolutely.
And that translates into religion too. They want eternal salvation, eternal security. They want to know an answer for why we're here in the universe.
Right.
The I don't
that's
know.
That's why we want easy answers.
Yeah.
That's why religion sells. It's because religion fills in the gaps. It offers certainty and clarity to it unclouds the mystery, and it just gives you all the answers. And there's a power that comes. There's a feeling that comes with that, and I think you probably resonate with that as well. Like, when you feel like you have the answers, we're going back to when I used to do street preaching. I felt invincible. Like, it was a tangible feeling. I would approach almost anybody. Like, I was fearless, absolutely fearless. because I felt like I had this truth and I couldn't be wrong. It wasn't even a question of being wrong. It was just like, this is the truth, and I have to do this. And
And it came from a place of pure compassion, I'm sure. Like you wanted to save them from hell,
well,
right?
I don't know if it's a pure compassion, but no,
Well, yeah.
I mean it did come from that place. I mean it was a very straightforward line of reasoning in my mind. Was, I literally believed in this burning place called hell, and I was like, here's a message that can help people avoid it. And yeah, absolutely, and there is so much baggage that comes with that, because and again, I mean, I've been very explicit about my journey, and having, I think it's part of the reason I ended up sort of crashing mentally and having mental health issues, because you can't carry that weight, you can't carry that burden, and I did for a long time. I carried the psychological weight of that belief.
Yeah, that's part of the reason why I do what I do, because I do think it's dangerous. And I'm not saying all Christians are like this, but when you start believing in the spiritual realm of demons and angels around you,
Oh yeah,
like that is not healthy psychologically, to lie in your bed at night and thinking, if you hear a noise, is that a person or is that the devil?
Yeah, and you
Yeah.
don't have to be like a strident believer to worry about those things. Like even the most moderate people worry about those things.
Really?
I think humans. I mean, if we sort of drop the labels for a moment and move away from this like believer versus unbeliever kind of paradigm,
Sure.
we're all human at the end of the day, and we all want to know that we're okay. I mean, death is the final, the final kind of
The
thing that we all have to face.
countdown.
It's the final countdown. Yeah, I mean, death. I was like consciously pondering this the other day. I was like, death is something we all have to go through, and there's no avoiding it.
Yep.
And so, of course, of course, people want to fill in the gaps, and of course, people want to say, "Hey, it's going to be okay." And I mean, it was quite a powerful. I don't know if you would have seen Ricky Gervais did that movie a number of years ago called The Invention of Lying.
Yeah, that's a good movie.
And I think it is a really good movie. And I think we need artistic work like that helps you, because that's the thing. I think these conversations that you initiate with people, I think great. There is a time and a place for it, but I think, I did this this 8-hour live stream the other day with a whole bunch of artists, like musicians and creative type people, and
I saw a bit of that.
Yeah, well, I didn't do a lot of talking on the live stream. I spent a lot of time just listening and just kind of being a fly on the wall, in amongst these people who are like these creative types. And just the common thread that runs through it, I just thought it was quite beautiful. Not to get too poetic here, but I was like, man, these artists, they see the world differently. Like they take the ordinary and the mundane, and they use it, and they craft it, and they shape it into something that can move us. And I think that's what we need. I think that's what we need is artistic work and creativity that can kind of, I mean, not to get all Jesus-y here, but I mean, I think there is a reason why Jesus spoke in parables. Like he spoke essentially in fictional stories. And I think there is something about fiction. There's something about the power of, I mean, I had the guy Paul Young on the podcast. He wrote the book called The Shack, which sold like 22 million copies. It was insane, right? And he gets invited to like atheist conferences and stuff like that. And he said to me, he goes, "This book is not a Christian book." He said it's a human book. It's about humanity, because it deals with loss and like a father who loses his daughter and all this kind of stuff. And it's a very human story. And there is a power to story, and I think what I think is, and maybe just to throw out a challenge here, is you don't want to just trade one dogmatism for another dogmatism, and I think, I mean, everybody, we like I say, we get this one shot on the planet, we get one go around. What happens afterwards, nobody really does know. Nobody knows for sure, and so I think.
Yeah, I agree with you, Mark. It's before you even came on, I was talking to Reed, and I let him know that I had a little bit of a tiny crisis this afternoon, because after I talked with Mike Brown yesterday,
Yeah.
the YouTube comments started flooding in, and this was I think his first time on camera talking about this stuff. And all the comments were pretty rough on him. And I'm thinking, you know what? I sincerely like the guy. I think he's a nice guy.
Yeah.
And I would not want to be inside his head and have to deal with these comments coming at him. And I asked myself, what am I doing? Am I hurting this guy? Why am I doing this? And
yeah, it's literally.
but the answer that I keep telling myself, and maybe I'm lying to myself, but when I was in my mid-20s or even early 20s, I wish there was a guy like me talking to me, because I hurt people. I hurt people when I was a Christian. I could tell you stories that just, and I have regrets. And I did it in the name of Christianity. And there's a lot of Christians who say, no, Doug, you did the right thing, if I was to tell the stories. But looking back, like, I hurt people. And I don't want, but maybe I'm hurting people now. I don't know. So
yeah. I think it's that thing where I know there's an analogy, like if you're driving down a straight road and you focus off to the left or whatever, like you start veering towards what you're focusing on. And I think, first of all, thank you for being honest about what you're saying. I think, because I would put my hand up and say the same thing in many ways. But you can't, I think you've got to reconcile your past in a way that it doesn't keep repeating itself. Like, it is what it is. And I get it that, like we talked about earlier, that when people spend years and years in religion and trying to work this shit out, and it's painful and it sucks, and you want to throw your fists up to the heavens and, fuck you, God. Like, there's anger. There is real feeling and emotion. And I think it's important. I totally do. But at the same time, I think you've got to forgive yourself, for one. I have a million regrets as just in general as a human being. I've said and done some stupid bullshit, but you can't change what you can't change. And ironically, this is what kind of brings me back to the kind of Jesus narrative. But but
I think there is value in religious stories. They're great stories, like the one about Jesus saying, like, you hypocrite, first take the plank out of your own eye, and then you'll see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye.
Yeah,
that's a great message. That's great.
I've noticed that many atheists don't. Even Lucas said to me early on in our friendship, he was like, if Christians could act more like Jesus, I'd be down with that. Like, I think the issue is not, most atheists I've come across, quite honestly, don't seem to have that much of an issue with even the teachings and ideas from Jesus. But it's when ego comes into it, and when it becomes a power play, and when religion becomes heavy-handed, and it does. It becomes manipulative, and it hurts people, and we hurt people.
By the way, for the record, I do have problems with the teaching of Jesus, but we won't get into that.
Oh, sure. No, no doubt. That's fine. That's not surprising. But you evil atheist.
But like,
can we go there for a second? Can I ask you what one of your key? I'm curious just to know, like, what would be an example of a teaching of Jesus that you'd take issue with?
The most fundamental teaching or premise of the gospel is vicarious redemption.
Yes, I'm so glad you said this.
Yeah, the scapegoat to me, scapegoating, taking the sins of another's transgression upon yourself, whether you're a god or not, is evil.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Oh man, where do I start? I'm so glad you brought that up, because I don't see the gospel that way anymore. I used to. Obviously, that's what I grew up with. There are definitely other ways of looking at what happened on the cross. There's a guy, he passed away a couple of years ago, named Rene Girard. You may find his work really interesting. He wrote a bunch of stuff on what it was called the mimetic theory. Mimetic meaning to mime, like as in mirror theory. and it was this idea that basically conflict in the world doesn't come from opposing values, but from from opposing desires or values, but from shared desires or values. So when you got two people that want the same thing, that's when it becomes this precious object that they're fighting over, sort of a thing. And essentially, I don't know how to say this in the best kind of way, logically. There's a lot to it to look into, but essentially, I mean, there is scripture in the Bible that talks about the idea of like blood sacrifice, and there is explicit verses in the Bible that sort of go against the idea of blood sacrifice. You know, it's sort of, I think it's in Hebrews it talks about, you know, do you think God needed a sacrifice, kind of a thing? Like, I'm paraphrasing, but this idea that Jesus' death on the cross, quote unquote, paid for our sins. It's almost like it's not that was literally the narrative. It was that we, because of our human guilt and our conscience, we needed to, like, for at least for a season, we kind of needed to see it that way, because it's an imagery to go, oh, your sins are taken care of, it's okay, da 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 da. But then as you move on in the progression of the sort of understanding, it was more to do with the idea that Jesus' death on the cross was an end of the whole. He was putting an end to this idea that it's what they call the myth of redemptive violence, right? This idea that blood sacrifice can actually pay for sin. You know, I'm really stumbling over my words. It's something I haven't kind of looked at for a little while, but it's something worth looking into, and it is interesting. I agree with you, Doug. I share the same concern that you share on that issue, to be honest. So.
Well, and it's, C.S. Lewis said it best. If any man were to have done what Jesus did, it would be worse than the devil himself. And, to take the sins or the transgressions of another upon yourself. But since God did it, then it's okay. But C.S. Lewis is basically saying a certain action, X, is evil. But if God does it, then it's good. And I'm saying no, like this is wrong to scapegoat, and that's what the cross is about. And if you talk to Orthodox Jews, if there's any Orthodox Jews listening to me right now, they're giving me high fives right now in cyberspace, because they've been saying this for millennia.
Yeah.
But getting back to SC, like I really want you to know that, first of all, I'm not a pure SEer, but I do think that the method is valuable. And here's a very recent example. Yesterday, when Mike Brown came on, one of the first things he said was, I've had a lot of conversations with atheists, but they never end well. Or he said something to that effect, like it just ends abruptly and the atheists walk away and don't want to talk to them. And after talking to Mike Brown yesterday, I can understand why. But I talked to him for an hour and 40 minutes yesterday, and it was civil. I never raised my voice. I never swore at him. He never raised his voice at me. I think on 2 or 3 occasions, he said, Doug, I'm really enjoying this conversation. I said the same.
Yes.
And even though we might not have gotten too far or whatever, it worked. Like we had a civil dialogue. And we both walked away from it reflecting and replaying it back in our heads, watching the video replay and saying, okay, should I have said that? Maybe I shouldn't have said that. And, what I said was good. And so it really helps people, me and him, think about things.
And that's an anomaly, because there are so many people in the comments saying, Doug, you're a saint. How do you do this?
Yeah. Oh, no, look, I think one thing I've had to learn the hard way with this is to take it at an individual level as well. And I think it's not fair for me to lump all of, like, just because there's, like, a handful of you that I know of that do this thing called SE, you still have your own personality. You still have your own identity, right? Like, I'll be honest, I personally don't like what I see of Anthony Magnbosco. I don't like the way he does it, and that's just my opinion. Um,
Have you seen any of my videos?
No, I have not, but I'm happy to look at them and tell you what I think.
I love feedback. Yeah.
Yeah, but you know, to me, I don't want to. You know, he's not here to defend himself, so I want to be respectful to a degree. But what I don't like is when anything becomes this kind of gotcha. Like, oh, you know, it's like, and I said to move away from the subject of atheism to make the same point. You know, I've been in this kind of social justice, anti-social justice kind of echo chamber for probably a good year. I've just sort of come out of it, and when your sole purpose is to just like own or wreck someone or like dominate them, or it just becomes completely ridiculous to me, you know. And I just want to say, Doug, with what I've seen from you, I don't get that from you in many ways. I do get you're like a pit bull with it, like something like you go after these conversations and you dig in. I see you really kind of driving your points home.
Well,
and really
my pet peeve, my pet peeve is when people are not being intellectually honest. I do not mind if someone says to me, I don't know. In fact, I congratulate them. But if they are obfuscating and beating around the bush, and just, that's when I just like.
But there's a clip of a conversation. I actually lifted the conversation and put it on my YouTube channel. But there's it was actually the podcast that Milo Yiannopoulos was on a little bit after it was on mine. It was actually the Drunken Peasants podcast. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that podcast. TJ or whatever. That was actually the podcast that got him in a whole bunch of scandalous trouble, that lost him his book deal and his job. But there was they got into a little bit of religion stuff there, and you know, it became this like these kind of three. I think it was three of them against him, and they were just like, oh yeah, oh wrecked, oh, and they just got real rowdy, and it just became. And like I get atheists commenting on the video, just going, oh my gosh, this makes me ashamed to be an atheist. Like, you know, it's just is so uncivil and so ridiculous, and you know. And even his response was pretty calm, and he even said himself, he goes, look, I don't think there's any gotchas here. He goes, I think that life is messy and complicated. He goes, if you're asking me to answer everything, he goes, I'm sorry, I can't. He's like, I don't even know if my beliefs are going to be the same in 20 years or whatever, you know? And I guess I would say the same as well. Like, that's why I've moved away severely from valuing anything remotely close to apologetics or defending the faith, because I'm like, my faith is not a solid thing that I can just defend. It's not like a pile of bricks that I'm like kind of guarding and defending. I don't see it like that. You know, if in all sincerity I got to a point where I was like, I can't do this God thing anymore and it doesn't make sense to me, I would have to be intellectually honest about that. I would have to. I don't imagine. I can't even imagine really what that would be like. But if I did kind of get to that place where I dive right to the bottom of the pool and was like, okay, this is all there is, and you know, fine. Like I would have to own that and be okay with that.
Cool. Yeah, totally.
But so far, I haven't got to that place. So.
So we're good with SC then?
Is this the whole point of the stream, is to redeem the process of everything? No, look, it's fine.
This started a year ago on Blab, and it seems like your views on SC is like driving through South Dakota. It's like you're up here one day and then you're down here the next, and
again, it's processing. Absolutely. I'm not opposed to agreeing to that at all. I think my view on it could change 20 times by tomorrow. I mean, I have no idea. I think all of life is a process, if we're honest. I think even in your days of being a quote unquote Christian or being, you know, a believer, whatever you want to call it, like you would have had days where you felt stronger in your belief and less strong, you know. Like, I think it's just human. I think it's part of it. And that's what I resist, I think, is the certainty. Actually, I found it interesting. What is? I read your bio on Twitter. What is your bio
Oh,
say on
my
Twitter?
catchphrase is doubt is a virtue, and certainty. Doubt is a virtue that can lead
I
to.
believe doubt is a virtue that can lead to humility, and certainty can lead to arrogance.
Yes.
Do you know the irony of that sentence?
If you're about to say that's a certain statement, it's not. I use the word believe. I could be wrong about what I just wrote.
Actually, that's true. Touche. All right, fair enough. You've obviously had that.
There's
one
no
before.
off position on the genius switch, Mark. I think about these things.
I believe. Actually, that's it. Oh, that's a good out. That's a good way to.
I've had a lot of pastors read my label up there and say, "Oh, you know, how ironic. He doesn't realize he just contradicted himself." And I point out, "Do you know with certainty everything you believe, Mr. Pastor?"
What do you think of the There was the famous theologian G.K. Chesterton, who, in reference to Jesus' words on the cross, where he says, my God, why have you forsaken me?" G.K. Chesterton mused the idea, and he says on the idea that on the cross, Christ becomes an atheist. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I don't agree. Because he said, my God, my God. Would an atheist say, like, genuinely cry out to something they didn't believe existed?
Again, well, okay, so this is something, well, like Peter Rollins wrote like a whole book on this kind of idea. What he argues is that it's more than just an intellectual atheism, and he talks about it being an existential atheism, where it's the loss of everything.
We call that backsliding in my parts.
No, yeah, Jesus backslid on the cross. Oh my god.
That's funny.
Yeah. No, that's fine. I just thought you might have something interesting to say about that. Is there anything in the Bible or anything in the tradition of Christianity that still like holds value or like intrigues you in any way?
I think what is it? Do unto others as you would have to do unto you. Like that's a perfect principle to live by. That's great.
Okay.
I think turn the other cheek is pretty good, and that's not practical in all cases, but it sets the picture of what I kind of do on my live streams. I almost let people just beat me up, and
do you know that's not what that verse means, though? By the way.
Well, yeah, I know, but that mentality of courtesy.
It's not about pacifism.
Well, tell that to a Mennonite.
I've met a Mennonite. I've had a Mennonite pastor on my podcast.
You're talking to a former Mennonite right now.
Oh, really? No, I had a guy. His name's Shane Hips. He was a Mennonite pastor.
I was raised Mennonite, and we were taught that turn the other cheek is not just a personal thing; it's a political.
Oh yeah, I know
thing.
a little bit about the Mennonite history. Actually, they had it pretty rough in some places.
Oh yeah. My ancestors, yeah.
Was it the Catholics? They used to take them out to baptize them, and they would like drown them and stuff.
Yeah,
is it Mennonites?
My ancestors came from Russia because Stalin basically said, you got to fight in the wars, and they said, no, I thought we had a deal that we would have great crops for you, and no, you got to fight too. And so then a lot of them fled to Canada, and some in the northern states.
Did you see Mel Gibson's movie Hacksaw Ridge by any chance?
No, I was going to see it. I haven't seen it yet, though.
Oh, you should, honestly. It's amazing. It is amazing. It's a true story about a guy named Desmond Doss, who was he was a Christian, but he was like a pacifist, essentially. Yeah. He refused to pick up a weapon, but he wanted to serve his country.
Was he a Mennonite in that movie or no?
I don't know. It doesn't specifically say that he was a Mennonite, but he was basically a pacifist, and I think he was a Seventh Adventist, actually. To get specific, I think. But yeah, it was pretty amazing. He in one night he saved like 70 guys or something ridiculous. Like it was amazing, just incredible.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. But I think well, one thing I was going to ask about, I don't know how much longer you guys want to talk for, but the whole concept of story, right? We're talking about parables and narrative and stuff like that. There seems to, like, since the beginning of, like, since the emergence of language, obviously human beings have told stories, right? Passed down stories and written stories, and it seems like we can't live, like, we need stories. Like, we seem to have this innate drive to
Totally.
have a narrative to run on, like, and this kind of, it's interesting. Like, I was reading an article the other day about it's sort of to do with this whole social justice movement and social justice warrior kind of attitudes and things that are emerging on college campuses and whatnot. And it was basically saying how a lot of it is fueled by a very secular sort of atheistic mindset. And it was talking about the power of mythology and different things, and saying how you would imagine, like, a world that moved away from religion, you would imagine would be a world that people would sort of be more like live and let live, and like each to their own, and we don't want to bother you and do what you want to do. But what we're seeing is very different, and we're almost seeing in the very rejection of traditional religion, we're kind of seeing people setting up a new one and setting up their own kind of, you got within things like feminism, you've got like the patriarchy, or
Totally.
you've got these mythological kind of ideologies that we seem to, when we strip everything back and say, oh no, we don't need these ancient stories, what seems to be happening is people kind of are coming up with new ones. And the thing that I was actually thinking about it, I was thinking with this whole, like, if you want to think of the social justice warrior sort of thing as a religion, it's the narrative that it kind of purports and puts out is the only salvation is complete capitulation to their ideology. Like, there's no forgiveness of sins. Like, if you're a straight white male, like, you're guilty no matter what, and there's nothing you can do about it. And I was just kind of comparing it to the kind of, at least with Christianity, for example, you've got this concept of sin and everything like that, but at least you've got this way out, and there's like redemption and forgiveness, etc. Like, with this social justice kind of thing, it's like you completely capitulate to them, or you're anathema. You're out. So
I totally agree, man. I could talk to you so much about that. I have a great article for you.
I mean, I feel like I say, I was in this echo chamber for a good year and learned, just immersing myself in this stuff, and it's fascinating. It is fascinating, and I think I wonder if human beings can exist without any kind of religion. Like, it seems like religion is just in us. I mean, if maybe religion is not the right word, but this desire to cling on to stories and to have a narrative to run on. Like, human beings need, we need a script, essentially. It's just interesting to me.
Well, and this is, you mentioned before confidence in SC being the best method. I think when it comes to transfer of ideas, even changing people's minds about certain things, those who can tell stories and tell jokes and be, really funny.
Oh, absolutely. That's why people like Milo were winning on campus for a good year, because he was a provocateur. I mean, he was referred to by someone as almost like a court jester, right? He was the trickster,
Totally.
and it was like performance art. And whether you agree with him or not, he could capture an audience,
Yeah.
And it is about telling stories.
We had a live stream, like, gushing about Milo, like, after his appearance on Bill Maher, like, on Doug's channel. You can check it out.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I'd love to check that out. That was just before his big scandalous demise. I wonder what's going to happen with him. Like, I've mused on it. Like I say, I followed him very, very closely since like December 2015, and I don't know. I honestly don't know if he's going to recover from what happened to him with the scandal and what happened, because it's almost like he had this, like, if you want to talk about narratives, like, he ran on this narrative of like, fuck your feelings. Like, that was his narrative, right? He would literally get up on stage and say, fuck your feelings. Like, and yet this kind of stuff comes out, and I have the deepest empathy for his situation, and he talks about being a victim of sexual abuse and whatnot, and that's horrible. Like that's totally horrible. And he obviously used humor as a way to cover it up and to deal with it, and I get that, and it makes perfect sense to his character when you look at it. But it's almost like, and then he went out and did this press conference where he's kind of like, oh, I was a victim and da 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 da, and he just kind of explained himself, and everything. And I'm just like, you kind of pulled back the curtain. Like, if this was the Wizard of Oz, we just saw the little man behind the curtain, right? Like, I think he might be done here because, like, what else? I just don't know. Like, apparently his book is still going to come out and everything like that, and I'll probably buy it because I want to read it, but I just don't know how he can come back from this. I really don't.
I think he's going to have to reinvent himself in some way. We'll
Yeah.
see.
Well, I tell you what, you guys might find this interesting. I knew about this, but I'd never actually read it. This was back in 2012. This is an article he wrote about censorship online. It's not too long. Do you guys mind if I read this?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. It's not too long. This is from 2012.
As Reed looks at his watch.
Well,
So Tim, just think.
Okay, we'll tell you what.
yourself
We'll go 10 more minutes and then we'll.
Oh yeah, we'll wrap up. But just as I'm reading this, just think this is Milo Yiannopoulos saying this. Okay, he says the article is called "The Internet is Turning Us All into Sociopaths." Glibness and superficial charm, manipulation of others, a grandiose sense of self, pathological lying, a lack of remorse, shame, or guilt, shallow emotions, an incapacity to feel genuine love, a need for stimulation, frequent verbal outbursts, poor behavioral controls. These are just some of the things that social media are encouraging in all of us. They're also a pretty comprehensive diagnostic checklist for sociopathy. In fact, that's where I got the list. Social media are often blamed for coarsening of the discourse of the internet, for the depressing and seemingly exponential rise in libelous and abusive and unpleasant behavior between human beings encumbered by worries about consequences. In fact, the problem has been around longer than that. And social media is only turbocharging a fundamental structural problem with people and the internet. The mediating layer, we might say, of a screen and a keyboard encourages us to write unspeakable things to other human beings that we would never dream of saying in person. There has always been an abuse on the internet, but before the social revolution, it was largely restricted to anonymous comment threads, message boards, and chat rooms. Any site owner who allowed anonymous comments could reasonably be held responsible morally and legally for the content appearing on his site. But now there is a disturbing bleed from anonymous hatred to defamatory, spiteful language being posted under the author's real name using their social networking profile. It's as if our usual moral safeguards are being broken down by terrifying new online landscape in which the default mode of communication is a form of attack. I won't read the rest, but basically he goes on, he finishes it by saying, his closing sentence, he says, but if the internet is ubiquitous as it is now, proves too dangerous in the hands of the psychologically fragile, perhaps access to it ought to be restricted. We ban drunks from driving because they're a danger to others. Isn't it time we did the same to trolls?
Wow.
Yeah.
That's Milo Yiannopoulos. Like, isn't that, like, that to me is just testament of the progress. Like, we're all on a journey somewhere, and I think it makes a lot of sense to me. I think what he realized, what I was talking to someone about this the other day. I think he still holds a lot of those values, ironically, but I think what he tapped into, what he's railing against now, is this, like, the pendulum has just gone too far the other way, where people were just going out of their way to be victims and out of their way to be oppressed,
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what he saw. I think he was speaking about, like, genuine, Joe Blogs, whatever, just being harassed online for no reason. But now it's got to the point where people are just going out of their way to, like, paint themselves as victims. And I think he probably had this aha moment where he's like, this shit's gone too far, you know, and he just kind of
Yeah.
woke up. But
Either
yeah,
that
I
or
was
he saw
fascinated.
dollar signs as well. That never hurts.
Well, that's the other thing as well. That's the other part of it. Yeah, I totally could see that as well, for sure. Absolutely. But yeah, pretty interesting stuff.
That's the only reason why I do my YouTube channel. Like, I'm making pennies and pennies hand over fist.
Well, are we gonna wrap up here? Or
Yeah. In fact, Mark, why don't you close us in prayer, and we'll end this. No, I'm kidding.
I could. Bless us and keep us, O Lord.
Can you actually? Can you? I don't know if this is gonna.
Someone in the chat, by the way, someone says Mark's a good talker. When does Doug get to ask some SE?
No, we're not doing that. With
No,
Mark.
we're not doing that tonight. But do you remember the types of prayers you used to pray?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Like on the street?
Oh, like with people.
But would you pray like loud? Like would you do the exact opposite of what Jesus said not to do? Like, would you pray in public?
No,
really
I
loud?
wouldn't. No.
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 Did you speak in tongues as well?
What's that?
Did you speak in tongues as well?
Oh yeah, Sharamakanda.
Oh wow.
Can you still do it?
We were Pentecostal. Can I still do it? I could probably still do it, Doug.
You want to try? I would love to hear it.
No, I just gave you a little sample.
Oh, come on, that was like half a second.
My mum's sister used to she used to speak in tongues, and her speaking in tongues was MacGyver.
Okay, Mark, it was really fun. I enjoyed this
Oh,
conversation.
absolutely. Oh, for sure, man.
Yeah. Stay on for a second. I have a few links for you, but go ahead and end the live stream.
Okay. Good night, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
For,
Yeah.
contributing
Thanks for
in
listening.
chat. Yep. Bye.